All right, guys. Welcome to KGO Sports Talk. We're at week 10 already. The season's flying by. Just want to jump right in here as far as some topics, questions that I got from guys leading up to this video. McKinley mentioned, he goes, just to throw it out there, he's like, maybe we should do a last place trophy that needs to be displayed at that person's place of work for that entire next season. I think that's a pretty interesting idea. Kind of reminds me of the show The League on FXX, where those guys definitely get into it and try to humiliate each other. So I think let's let that marinate. Maybe we can throw some ideas out there at some point. But as far as how that would work and what we would use for the losers trophy, but also Gordy mentioned also what trade should have been made that wasn't post trade deadline. So that's kind of an interesting question. I'm going to leave it at that. Question from Aussie. Has anyone ever done two same-day trades with two different league managers? I don't think that had ever happened until it just happened within the last week, with Aussie completing trades in the same day with both Beeman as well as Capron. So hats off to Aussie. He did a lot of trading this year, as did some other people that we'll get into later. But some interesting facts about the league so far this year. In regards to the waiver money, 4 guys have no waiver money left at all. In Aussie, Eddie, Capron, and myself. 2 other league managers have under $8, and that is with Beeman and Adams. So with 7 weeks remaining, including this week, if you are planning on making it to the championship, that would be 7 weeks with either no or very limited funds. We'll see whether that can happen for any of those 6 teams that I just mentioned. A lot of them are in the driver's seat. Obviously, Eddie in first right now. Sleeper and Shockers awards. Danny Woodhead, I would say, has been a surprise. Maybe not a shocker, but he's been a sleeper for sure. He's gotten a lot of points the last few weeks. Melvin Gordon did sprinkle in a week there where he went off, but overall Danny Woodhead's been huge. Alan Hearns for me, huge pickup, 6 straight weeks with a touchdown. Gary Barnage, or Barnkowski, as Ozzy likes to call him, 30-year-old, guy that was just completely off the radar, having a phenomenal year as a 30-year-old. So that is kind of unheard of. Travis Benjamin, another guy in Cleveland, been a little quiet as of late, but has had some monster games this year. Dion Lewis. So we're touching on a couple of guys that Adams has utilized here and picked up. Dion Lewis, unfortunate ACL tear, but was dynamite this year when he played. Willie Snead. Willie Snead's been crucial for New Orleans with their passing attack that was kind of struggling early on. And Derek Carr. So to touch on a QB, Derek Carr's come into his own. Having Amari Cooper has been huge for that team. Oakland, not a pushover anymore. They're a tough team to beat. Some surprises just as far as overall performances for teams. How about a team without their number 1 receiver? Really without any notable receivers at all. Their number 1 receiver is now Ted Ginn, and that is with the Carolina Panthers. They are 8-0, undefeated still. Cam Newton playing phenomenal thus far this year, and they've got another nice matchup this week on the road against Tennessee to go 9-0. So some other surprises though, just on the injury side. Earlier this year we've had some crazy injuries. There's so many every year, but this year I feel like has been even more than ever before. A couple of new injuries. Kidney lacerations, 2 within a 8-day period. I've never heard of that before as far as an injury from an NFL game. And those 2 players, Keenan Allen and Andrew Luck, so 2 just monster players that, for Gordy and Capron respectively, it hurts. It hurts big. But We'll see if they can turn it around. As far as matchups go this week, Eddie and Jay knotted at 111 for projections. This is a huge matchup. Eddie's in first, Jay's in sixth. There's only one game separating them now. So this is, I mean, Jay, if Jay takes down Eddie, obviously there's going to be a shakeup. There's a big, big point differential in this league as far as total points go for a lot of the teams. Capron's number one right now in points, averaging a monster amount of points per week. I'll touch on that later. Eddie, though, is on a run. Eddie's on a run. He's won 3 straight. Jay would need to take him down to avoid Eddie going on a 4-0 streak in the last month. So that's huge. Big-time matchup. Aussie and McKinley, 110 and 107. They're both knotted up at 3 and 6. They both have a shot at the playoffs. I think they both know that this is when it's got to start right now. They've got to amp it up. They have to get a win this week. If they don't, their chances of making the playoffs are minimal. In this matchup, as far as players now, Aussie, I don't even know who the hell he has on his team because he's like Capron. He trades everybody. But he has some guys that can put up points. I think for him, the fact that he's throwing out there Derek Carr now, he's got a favorable matchup this week. He's got guys that can blow up. So I think that's going to be a matchup that I look to very closely. McKinley's actually got a surprisingly good team too. McKinley's got Carson Palmer. He's got Emmanuel Sanders, who unfortunately is a game-time decision this week. He's got Deshaun Jackson now finally back. What can McKinley do? Can McKinley make a run here with guys that are kind of getting back at it? Marshawn Lynch, what's going to happen with him this week? So we'll see what happens with that matchup. Adams and Billy. Adams, unlike Eddie, on the opposite side of the spectrum, Adams was dominating. Adams, of course, it's inevitable with these monster injuries that his team has, unfortunately had happen to them with guys like Arian Foster. Dion Lewis obviously going down. That hurts big time. So Adams has, been unlucky in that. He's on a 3-game slide. This would be a 4-game slide if he were to dump this week against Billy. Billy's also had some injuries as far as Jamal Charles going down. So he's, made some trades to recover, picking up Gio Bernard. So we'll see where that goes. I mean, in this matchup, I think it really comes down to the Green Bay game. You've got Billy with James Starks playing well. Green Bay is trying to avoid a 3-game slide, being that they've lost their last 2 to Carolina and Denver. They have a very favorable matchup. So I think that's going to help Billy, James Starks going in there and playing this week. So in regards to that matchup, that's going to be another tight matchup. We'll see what happens there. Angier and Chuck, another close one, knotted at 115 in the projections, 9th and 11th in the standings. Only 1 game separating these guys, scratching and clawing for playoffs. I look at the flex position in their matchup, and I see C.J. Anderson versus Antonio Andrews, and I think that right there is going to be interesting because you're talking about 2 guys. C.J. Anderson did nothing all year. 2 games ago, had a solid week, about 20 points. What is he going to do this week against Kansas City? Ronnie Hillman's a little nicked up. Is C.J. Anderson finally going to have another kind of backup performance from what he just did a couple of weeks ago? It's been struggle city for him besides that. And as far as Angier goes, I like, the matchup with Odell. Odell Beckham Jr. against the Patriots. They're obviously going to be trailing. They're going to have to chuck it downfield a ton just to try and keep up with the Patriots. So I look, as far as the QB wide receiver duel here, I look at Andy Dalton and Drew Brees, and then Demaryius Thomas versus ODB. That's a hell of a matchup right there for those 2 guys. So another great matchup with Angier and Chuck. Beeman, really pretty much the all-star matchup of the week. I mean, this is just, if this were the Sunday game, it would be, moved to prime time. It'd be Sunday Night Football. But Beeman's team projected originally at 144. And Capron, I believe, at 124. So this has got to be the highest projected matchup of all time. 144 I don't think I've ever seen. Really it comes down to, in this case, I mean, Capron traded. Todd Gurley's done a ton of trades this year. That's probably the only one that he would regret at this point, because he's fielded a phenomenal team. But I mean, I look at this matchup and it's interesting because it's kind of flipped. Pat's projections are huge this week. He's projected at 144. He's averaging over 130 fantasy points a week. Well, Capron, he's at 124. He just seems to get guys to blow up every week. Capron is averaging over 138 fantasy points per week. So when you go up against Capron, you just have to bank on, or you just have to expect a couple of his guys are going to go ape shit. They're going to flip out. 138 is absurd. That may be the highest ever as far as averages go in this league. I could be wrong. So that's a powerhouse matchup. And finally, Gordy and I certainly lean towards Gordy's team as far as having the edge in this one, leading up to the Thursday night game. Then in the Thursday night game, you know, my team just had a solid performance. Bills D, who I was right up until game time considering benching against the Jets, pretty potent offense. They went off, scored a defensive touchdown, ended up with 19 fantasy points. You know, so sometimes you just have to stick with your big guns. If they shoot you in the foot, they shoot you in the foot. But in this case, it worked out for me. Chris Ivory had a good game, put up, you know, did fumble, but ended up with 12.5, which I'll take. So as of now, up 31.5 to 0. Gordy's got some big guns yet to play, though. AP, Amari Cooper's been killing it, and I know Mike Evans is chomping at the bit, being that you've got, you know, the other receivers there, the number 2 and 3, Vincent Jackson's out, and their third receiver, whose name, you know, doesn't even matter at this point, he's out as well. So at this point, it's going to be an interesting matchup there for us. We're both at 5-4, desperately need the win. A lot of guys knotted up at 5-4, so it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out. One thing we've got to mention here before I wrap things up, the waiver activity's been crazy. I mean, that's what makes this league great, is the waiver activity. You have to really plan. You have to really think about how bad you want a player. Okay? D'Angelo Williams, we just set a record. I don't even need to look this up. This is a record. Guaranteed. D'Angelo Williams, over half the league bid for this guy. He was I mean, granted, he's a timer. I think he's 32 or 33 years old. And granted, he performed well the couple of games that he played earlier this year. Beeman got him for a whopping $79 out of a $100 total budget. And it's a huge pickup, you know? Look at these other bids. Just listen to this. Outbid Aussie, 62. Adams, 50. Angier, 43. Capron, 42. Jay, 33. McKinley, you know, sprinkles something in there. $12. I bid the rest. I mean, I only had $10 left. I bid everything on him, knowing that I probably wouldn't get him. But I'm like, hey, you know, maybe something happens. And Eddie, you know, who you've got to just, you know, Eddie was maybe at 0 already. Eddie's like, I'm throwing a bid in, 0. And in closing, it's going to be a great week. We've got some phenomenal matchups. I couldn't like fully dive into all of them, but one guy that's transformed the league trade landscape that I just had to mention. I mean, he's gone a little crazy on some of these trades, but hey, I traded with him. You know, three for 3, and we all know who this is through either text messaging, conference calls, you know, driving to your house, through WhatsApp. He's gotten a lot of trades done. We have potentially, you know, gotten people that were a little maybe afraid of making a move, maybe afraid, a little reluctant to put their foot on the gas on some of these moves. He's pushed them across the finish line. 7 trades, 14 players. Only player on his active roster, on his entire team that he drafted, Tyler Eifert, in the 14th round. Okay? I mean, mind-blowing. Being how good he's played this year, and just the fact that Capron's had the balls to move that many guys on his team, and he's still averaging 138 per week. So, guys, we got a ton of good matchups this week. A lot of action going on, and the holidays coming up. You know, it's a great time of year. I'm pumped for it. Week 10, it kicks back off tomorrow. Love you guys.